In this episode, I will be reviewing the DVD release of Sorry, Wrong Number by Via Vision Entertainment, which was just released in September of this year. And I will also be reviewing the film, which was released in 1948. This film noir was directed by Anatole Litvak, and it starred Barbara Stanwyck and Burt Lancaster. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast exploring storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, and theater, among other areas of the arts. Today, again, I am going to be reviewing this great release of Sorry, Wrong Number, which is a film that I've seen before and is a lot better than I remembered. I remember enjoying it, but I really enjoyed it. And I'll get into a deeper review of the film shortly. But first, looking at the DVD, this is the beautiful cover. There you got Stanwyck and Lancaster together. Here we have the back, and you'll notice that it's an NTSC format, which works not everywhere, depending on where you live. It mainly works in the United States, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Central America, parts of South America, and some other countries. So if you're looking to order this from Via Vision, just double check, depending on where you're located, that NTSC will work. I know it definitely works in the States and, of course, Australia, because that's where Via Vision is based. And I'm in Canada, and I played it. I watched the entire film. It all worked really well for me. The quality of the DVD is fantastic. And what I also really like, I'll just go to the inside, is how Via Vision shows you all of... Here, I'll pop out the disc just for a second, just to show the slipcover inside, is that it then shows you all of the various movies that Via Vision have released lately. And what I like about that is just letting you know about the company. Because I remember when I was younger, you get a DVD, you don't necessarily think about the company. But now, obviously, people religiously see what Criterion is releasing, or Indicator, or Kino, because they like the label. And what I like about that is just a reminder that they, of course, are a label that have many interesting releases. And of course, you pop it open and you'll see if any of these movies interest you. So it's connecting you to the company immediately. But it's a really wonderful release. I highly recommend getting it, as long as you have a DVD player. Like I said, in the countries that I mentioned, it will certainly work. And it does include English subtitles. If anyone who, perhaps if English is not your first language, it does have the subtitle option on the special features here. But yeah, really great, and I highly recommend getting it from Via Vision Entertainment. Jumping into a review of the film, for anyone who hasn't seen this film, the plot, according to IMDb, is while on the telephone, an invalid woman overhears what she thinks is a murder plot and attempts to prevent it. This is a really unique plot, and it's classic noir in so many ways, because it has it opens in real time with flashbacks, like a lot of film noir. From the flashbacks are from different characters' points of views. It has multiple characters, melodramatic crime plot, but also really strong characters. I wouldn't consider this a character study, but they have some really interesting dilemmas, which are certainly rooted in noir, and it explores themes of, feeling stuck, feeling as though you have no other option but to turn to crime. We don't have so much as a femme fatale, but a little bit more of a home fatale with the Burt Lancaster character, and I will get into how that is, even though the Stanwyck character is a femme fatale in a different sort of way, which again I'll get into shortly. But it's really unique, and you don't really know exactly what's going on until the last really 20 minutes. You get to really kind of connect the dots, but because of all these flashbacks from these various characters, everything is sort of it's really in mysterious, and you don't exactly know what's happening. So as we see, immediately after the cameras goes into this office, and the phone is off the hook. And then it cuts to Barbara Stanwyck in bed, clearly trying to phone that person. I didn't notice that until I went back and was watching some certain moments of the film before doing the review today. And I actually missed the shot of the fact that the person she's calling, which is Burt Lancaster, her husband, and the phone is off the hook. It's beautifully directed because Litvak, he does a lot of things visually here in terms of telling the audience the story. For example, when she's calling the operator to get in touch with her husband, she says, "Oh, I need to talk to my husband," and the camera pans over to a picture of her and Burt Lancaster. So right away, he's telling the audience who she's referring to, who the relationship is with that person in the picture. So there's a lot of things that are visually quite interesting in the film, and I'll get into some of those more visual touches. But she's calling him. She can't get a hold of him. She manages to get in touch with his secretary. And the secretary, there's a flashback from the secretary's point of view of this woman that came into the office that he had lunch with. And so she gets this woman's phone number. And now, so we get more of the story of what's going on, but it's all strange. It's really, really weird, particularly one of the first flashbacks from the girlfriend, played by Ann Richards. So Sally Hunt, who was an ex-girlfriend of Burt Lancaster, who Barbara Stanwyck's character Leona knew. So she's living with this man. She has a child, Sally Hunt, and he works for the district attorney. And while the little boy answers the phone and puts the phone on hold, and you see her husband with a coworker, and they're talking about Henry Stevenson. So it's like, okay, what exactly is up here? Sally Hunt can only say so much in the house because she doesn't want her husband to hear. And then she talks about having followed her husband out of the house and on to Staten Island in this abandoned house and this like abandoned little lunch place there, and that she could only really find out so much. I mean, the interesting thing about the flashbacks is that the characters only know so much about what's going on. So again, and we never see a flashback from Burt Lancaster's point of view, who obviously knows everything that's going on. So that's why really it's not until the very end that we truly know what's going on. And she gets this hunch that her husband is up to something in relation to Henry, because he mentions that he's in the paper with his wife, and now they're in New York. They're actually from Chicago, but they're staying in New York because she's receiving medical treatment. That's a big part of the story, is that she's not well, Barbara Stanwyck's character. And so she gets this hunch that something is not quite right. Why did he seem so interested in the husband? He talks about having a hunch on him. So she follows him. There's this element where you get the feel that Sally is sort of, as they say in the films back then, stuck on an old flame, which you see in the Barbara Stanwyck's flashback. I hope this is making sense, because it is, like a lot of noirs, it is this a little on the convoluted side, but it's not confusing. And you find out that they were in a relationship, and Barbara Stanwyck as Leona was the one who got in between them. So you wonder, is she following her husband because she's stuck on Henry and she's worried about him? That's really up to the audience. But like I said, I mean, she only knows so much. She finds out that some arrests were made, and that's all she could really tell her. And one thing that's interesting in the film is this element of communication that people, because of not only the phone, can't get through to each other by use of phone, they also are being constantly interrupted, even with wherever they are in space. Sally can't have her husband hear her, so she goes to a payphone in a restaurant, and then she runs out of nickels to talk to Barbara Stanwyck. So she goes into the subway, and then she spots her husband. So then she has to hang up. Of course, we have the element of Barbara Stanwyck calling the operator, not trying to get through. Is trying to get through to Henry and can't reach him. So the communication, these cross lines, which is a big part of the film, is something that happens again and again. And the only reason that Leona, as Barbara Stanwyck, is really worried about her husband is because she can't get a hold of him. And at the same time, she, early in the film, when she's trying to call her husband, she gets crossed wires somehow, and she hears about this murder that's going to happen. And then the person says, well, in case the window's open, wait till the train goes by at 11:15, because the train is right very, very close to the window, and it will make a loud sound, so that if her window's open, obviously if she screams, no one will be able to hear. So there's that she's worried about. And this is a woman who we find out has some mental health issues. The element of mental health is interesting in this, which I'll get into. But when she begins to fall in love with Burt Lancaster early on, and there's also this element of class division in the film, and her father, played by Ed Begley, James, who's this rich guy who owns these sort of many he's a head of a drug company. And what you find out later is that Henry Stevenson, who Burt Lancaster plays, works at a drug company, works at a drugstore. So there's this element of class, because she wants to marry him, but he's very, very poor. And her husband, and actually Ed Begley says, well, what do you want to marry him for? So there's this element of like the rich versus the poor. But she's really determined to get with Henry. She meets him at this dance. She cuts in between Sally and Henry dancing. And then, she has no qualms. It's also because she's spoiled, that she thinks she can do whatever she wants. She's insensitive. She doesn't see that Henry's dating this woman. She doesn't care how Sally feels. She doesn't even care really how Henry feels, because he excuses himself to go back with his girlfriend. And then you see in the next scene that they're in a car together. And actually, what's interesting is that Leona is the pursuer, not Henry, even though he is the homme fatale character, because it's strongly suggested that he gets with Leona because of her money, because of what she had. And there's this, again, how the film is told visually, is that he suddenly cuts to the POV of Burt Lancaster as she gets out her cigarette case, and it's obvious, like this gold case that she's clear, it just, and it's Burt Lancaster's point of view looking at it and then panning up to her. So right away that the fact that she's so rich appeals to him, and she's in this fur coat and this fancy jewelry. And they begin to kiss, and he tells her a lot about his life, that his mother just died, and strongly suggested that he didn't have a very good relationship with her. You also find out from Sally that his father was an alcoholic with his 8 children, and that his father spent all of them, whatever he had made, we spent on booze. So he's always been poor, and Sally is trying to talk Leona out of marrying him, and she says it's because he's poor, and you're rich and he's poor. But is it also because she's in love with Henry? Again, that's Sally. That's up to the audience. But Leona is determined, and so she marries him and convinces her father to be okay with it. And this is a really interesting scene, because she really loses it on her father when he says, oh, no, you shouldn't marry him because of who he is, and he's poor and all this kind of stuff. And she really, really gets really, really emotional, and she pops a pill. So and then her father gets so worried, and it's like, okay, yeah, everything will work out. And then it cuts right to the wedding. So again, at this point, you don't really know what her problems are, but you find out again as the film evolves. But what's interesting is again what's this connection between Henry and Leona is, even though they come from worlds apart, they both have this element. This I don't even know if they're aware of this connection they have. Actually, I don't think they are aware, but they both feel stuck in very different ways. Leona is stuck because of the fact that she has to really be careful with her emotions, because in the film at a certain point she has a heart attack because of some of the arguments that she gets into with Henry, and so she gets these attacks. I mean, one, you could also argue that she's stuck because of her because of her privilege and her ignorance, and she can't really see the world around her. But that's depending on how one may look at it. And of course, Henry's stuck because he gets a job, yes, and he's in a better financial position. He's working for the father, but they keep him in his place. I mean, he wants more responsibility, and they say no. Again, that's where the class comes in, because Leona says to him, "You're not going to ruin my father's company." And earlier in the film, she says to him, "Oh, my father doesn't care about." She says something along the lines of, "My father doesn't care about how well educated someone is. It's just about how good they are at making money." So she's kind of like, she's charming him and making him think that she really believes in him, but then later on sticks him in a job and says basically that he can't do any better than that. So the film begins to like build this case. Strongly suggesting that Henry is up to killing Leona. For one thing, she's trying to call him and the phone is off the hook. That's like one of the first shots we see. Why is his phone off the hook? Is that an accident? We hear about this murder on the phone. Now, what she begins to think is that murder was about her, because then she gets a message from the operator that her husband's not going to be coming home, that he had to go out of town. He won't be home till Sunday. And then in the voiceover, again, done visually as well as with the use of voiceover, she's, also thinking back about what the message said. Wait till 11:15. She lives near the train. If her window's open, you wait till if her window's open, that's when the train will go by. So wait until the train goes by in case she screams. So, she looks out the window and then she begins to panic because she thinks, oh my God, is someone after me? People's mind plays on them, right? I mean, and because of her emotional problems, I can see why she would think that. I mean, she hears about this murder that's going to be at 11:15 and that the apartment's near a noisy train. That's where she lives. And then her husband's not coming home and she can't get a hold of him. So, people's mind begins to think all sorts of things that may be irrational, right? Often people's thoughts are irrational, the way the mind works. And it's not so out of this world that if that wasn't necessarily true, even though we do find out it is true, that she would begin to think that. Again, she's there alone. None of her nurses are there. They were all out of town. Someone at one point early in the film is knocking on the door. It feels like a horror film all of a sudden. So, your mind, you plays mind games. But that's what's interesting, is because you do begin to think, well, is this just a series of coincidences? Maybe he really, can't come home because he's out of town. Maybe that murder you heard about has nothing to do with you. But again, it's not really until the very end that, spoiler alert, we find out that, of course, exactly what she's worried about is absolutely true. So the other flashback that's interesting is the one from the chemist, Waldo Evans, and he's calling her. I love that scene. He's like in this room all alone. It's so dark. It's classic noir with the German expressionism. Like you see, he's clearly in a hotel because you see the letters of some of the hotel right outside of his window. He's clearly hiding, and he has this long message for her. And she's like, "Well, how are you expecting to remember all this?" Like he's like, "This person was arrested. This person got away. This and this and this." And then so he feels that he should tell her everything that's been going on. So he fills her in on, and again, we don't find all this information out until the last 20 minutes of the film, that, that Lancaster has been stealing some of the drugs from the company and been basically drug dealing. He's basically drug trafficking, and he cuts the chemist in on it. And so what's what I found really appealing about that is, again, this is where the noir comes in, the case of morals, characters feeling stuck, feeling that they have to turn to crime. We also find out from Waldo that he had these dreams to have these horses and out in England, and he doesn't have enough money to do it yet. And so it appeals to him to go into crime with Henry because now he can fulfill his dream. And Henry wants to be a big success, and so he turns to crime as also as a way to get revenge. I feel from Ed Begley and Leona, who Barbara Stanwyck plays from her, and Ed Begley's her father. So he's angry. He feels he's out of options, and he feels as though crime is the way to go. Now, what ends up happening, of course, now in Waldo's flashback is now he's telling Barbara Stanwyck as Leona everything that's been going on about now they were basically stealing drugs from the company and selling it. And so these drug dealers, these gangsters that they're working with, at this place at Staten Island that you saw earlier with Sally Hunt, who when she followed her husband, it's the same location. That's where they were meeting. So throughout the whole film, now it's evident that, okay, the cops know about this, that the cops are after them. And you don't find out how the cops knew, but the cops knew. And it really doesn't matter the details of how they get caught. But they do get caught, which is why Waldo is hiding. And so what the drug dealer says is that there's missing profits, something like 200 grand missing profits. And so Waldo and Henry are to blame. Now, what you don't know is exactly what happened, because why is Henry to blame? I mean, he seems guilty when he says he knows nothing about it. And the drug dealer, now, could he be doing that just because he knows Henry can get the money? And so he's just trying to blame Henry for it so that he can just get 200 grand for himself? Or did Henry really do something? You don't know. Again, it's up to the audience. But this is now where he basically strongly suggests that Henry kill Leona when he says, well, your wife's sick, right? Your wife's not well. You got this big insurance policy, like, hey, just sign here, IOU. The doctor says she might not turn out well. So, this is where the script gets vague, because, which is not so problematic. Maybe I did sort of was a little baffled because even though she has these emotional problems and there's some mental health issues, there was never anything about her potentially dying from anything. So it's they didn't feel the need to tell you everything. And I think that was okay. I mean, I didn't see that. You can sort of fill in the blank. So perhaps I shouldn't say that was a flaw in the script. But it did sort of make me go, what? But if you think about it later, again, we don't see Henry's flashbacks, Burt Lancaster's character, Henry's flashbacks. So did he tell the drug dealer about her condition, that she's possibly going to die in a few months? How did the drug dealer know the condition was that severe? You don't know. It's not so far-fetched that the drug dealer was going to talk Lancaster into killing her. Perhaps the drug dealer knew how much Henry hated her at this point. There's this great scene where we see, because she gets a hold of her doctor, Leona, and her doctor says, well, I told your husband all about your condition. And so Lancaster didn't tell her what the doctor said was that she didn't actually have a heart condition. It was all psychosomatic. And this is where it was interesting about where the mental health part of the film came, because he has a telephone wire in his hand, again, telephone, and he starts to squeeze it almost like a rope to choke someone with. And so what I thought was interesting is that clearly she had mental health issues, and he didn't have any compassion about it. He sort of was angry that it's not a physical, truly physical health problem, that it's mental. Back then, people didn't take that seriously, right? So he probably just thought she was some wacko lying to him. But the doctor does say, he makes point to say, no, she is unwell, but he doesn't really take it seriously because his hatred is still there. He still was going to go through with killing her. And so, why is that? Did he think she was a complete liar? Or did he get so far into his debt now with the drug dealer that he just was turning uh, to murder because he was so desperate, and now he's gone so far in his world of crime. It's really up to the audience, and of course we get to this ending when he calls her clearly as an alibi, that if the cops found once she was killed, that he had called in that moment, so as if that he would not be a suspect, I suppose. And so he's on the phone with her. This is when, she now knows everything, and he has no idea that she knows everything. And she goes, why didn't you just come to me for the money, for the 200 grand? I would have given it to you, even if you had stolen it. And then at that point, he's like, scream for help out the window, get out of the house. And it's a really beautifully acted scene from both Lancaster and Stanwyck. I mean, she's, screaming that someone's coming up the stairs, and oh my God, she's pleading with this murderer to not kill her. And it's so devastating. And Lancaster's trying to tell her to get out of the house. Now, clearly in that moment, because he's turned, Lancaster, as though, even though he's not a cliche homme fatale just out for money. I mean, because he is actually seduced by her. That's where she's a femme fatale in the sense that she goes after him, but not for his money, purely just for him, because she did fall in love with him. But he gets with her for money, and then he goes so far into this world of crime that even in that moment where, he's not trying to tell her to save herself because he realizes he loves her or something. It's because, oh, she'll give me the 200 grand. Perfect. Then then no problem. Then I can get out of this jam. So I thought that was interesting, is that he actually sinks so low, Lancaster's character Henry, that he goes into crime, that he first of all marries someone for money, that he goes into crime, and then he's even willing to kill her for this debt. It's really quite dark. I mean, it's really quite something, that his motives were never good, but it's done with the utmost empathy, because you do know that he is had a very rough life from everything that you found out about him. And so, he's doing the wrong things. You know that he tried to get a better position in the company, and that they made him feel that he couldn't do any better. So you do understand his anger, of course. Not that I agree with what he's doing, but it is done with empathy for his character. I thought in regards to his motives and his actions, which I thought was really, really, really interesting. But that last scene is just utterly, utterly devastating and bleak, as she's clearly strangled. You see the killer's hands go into the frame, and then as he calls back, the killer answers and says, "Sorry, wrong number." It's quite devastating. And then and to add on top of that, the cops who have been after them the whole time, those guys in the background, now are right in the foreground as they're waiting for him outside the phone booth. So he has no idea, Lancaster, that he is now also about to be caught. So as soon as the cops open the phone booth, and that's the last we see of Lancaster. Just back to the style, German expressionism is all over this film, with the use of dark shadows, and there's also these really interesting shots that Anatole Litvak was doing, where early in the film, when she's on the phone, is that the camera starts to pan down the stairways as she talks about the fact that she's alone because nurses and the staff had plans or whatever. They also live with her father. So she is the only reason she is alone is because they're in a different house in New York, because that's where she was to seek treatment. But the camera begins to pan down the staircase, and it goes towards the front door. And it's this eerie feeling of like, okay, is someone going to come in? Like, what's going to happen? Nothing happens. But occasionally the camera often moves a lot, and it just feels like something's lurking, something's going to happen, and then nothing happens. And then, of course, gradually things do happen. So I thought it was really interesting on that on all of those visual touches. This was written by Lucille Fletcher. It was originally a radio play. So it'd be interesting to see how it would be done as a radio play, because as you can see, anyone watching this, forgive me if it's hard to keep up with everything I'm saying, because there's so many characters and all these flashbacks and all these backstories, and where I usually wouldn't go into those details in a review, I thought it was essential in this case, because like I said, it's strong on plot, strong on character, but the way in which the structure of the film was written and the way in which the story was communicated, I thought was really clever. So I felt it was worth going through it as best I could. So forgive me if it got a little confusing at times, but it's a wonderful, wonderful film. Performances overall were fantastic, particularly Stanwyck, who's always so great at being really emotional, and she's always so committed. And those scenes where she has these panic attacks and the anger and the sadness and the anxiety. I mean, that's a noir, of course, rooted in anxiety, particularly at night. She had a lot of these scenes where she's alone in bed on the phone. That's really, really challenging. Particularly that moment where she realizes, or at least this is what she thinks, is that she's the one who is going to be killed that night. That's difficult to do, to sort of have a moment where you as the character are realizing something's going to happen. To do that, to have that reaction, it can be very challenging. So, as always, she's brilliant, and this is a great, great performance from her. And I highly, highly recommend getting the DVD from Via Vision Entertainment. It's now here we are in October 2022. Christmas is around the corner. So if you have any noir fans, here's a gift for Christmas, which is coming up. Or if you buy anything for Noirvember, perhaps, which is next month, here's a gift for someone who's a noir fan, if anyone's got a birthday or anything. Thank you so much. I hope that you have enjoyed this review on both the DVD and the film. I want to thank Via Vision Entertainment for sending me the DVD. For Owen James, who I've been in touch with, who sent me the DVD. Thank you so much. If this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that, and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.